So now that we learned how to insert, update, and delete things from inside our database directly from inside the website, now we have to talk about how to actually select things from inside a database and show it inside our website. So to begin with, let's go ahead and take a look at what exactly I have inside my text editor, so you can actually, copy what I have here, since we need a little bit of HTML in order to get this working. Inside my index page here, I do have a very basic form at the bottom. I'm just going to go ahead and text wrap so you can actually see what's going on here. I just have a very basic form that I styled a little bit inside my website, so it actually looks somewhat nice to look at, which is why I have this class up here. You can style this in however way that you want to. The styling has nothing to do with the PHP, so it's still going to work even if it doesn't look very good inside your website. I just did it to sort of like have something nice for this tutorial here. But as you'll notice inside the form here, I actually included a action that doesn't take us inside a include file. Now we're actually just going directly to a regular page inside the website here called search.php. And we're still using a post method since we're trying to submit data in this case here. Inside the form, you can see I have a very basic label just to have a label for this input down here that goes in and just simply takes a input from the user where we can search for something inside the database. Now, in this case here, because I wanted to create something, just a very simple little thing, I wanted to go inside my database and search for any sort of comments made by a certain user where we type in the username of that user. So if that user made a comment, then I want all the comments to show inside that page that I'm linking to called search.php. So technically we're creating a small search system here for a website. So if you want to have a search system inside a website, you can build a very basic one in this sort of sense here. So you actually learn how to build something that you could potentially use inside a small project if you wanted to. So essentially it's just a basic form where we go in and we type in a search word and then we just search for something. So the only important thing here to really note is where exactly we're taking this data to. So in this case, the action, the method, as well as the input down here where we actually assigned a name called user search. So with this basic form here, let's actually go ahead and start creating a search.php file. So going inside our project folder, I'm just going to go and create a new file, not inside the includes folder, but just inside where I have my index page. So I'm just going to create a search.php, and then I'm just going to go ahead and create it. Now inside this file here, I'm just going to copy paste everything from inside my index page, since this is just a regular page inside our website. So I'm just going to copy everything and paste it in. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and remove my form, since I don't think we need to have it inside this page here. And what we have to do now is just basically go in and write some PHP code that queries our database and searches for certain data inside the database using the search term that we wanted to search for, and show it inside this page here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go at the very top of this file, and I'm going to go above my doc type, and I'm just going to start up my PHP tags. Now in this case here, we do actually have HTML, like this is an actual page inside our website. So we do need to include a closing tag around the PHP code here, so we can't just not have it like we did in the previous episodes. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go inside our previous file, just any of the previous files we created in one of the last episodes. So we did create a form handler, we created a user delete and a user update. It doesn't really matter which one you want to go into. I'm just going to use the form handler.inc.php file here. And as you can see, we have a bunch of PHP code that we did create in the last couple of episodes. I'm just going to text wrap everything here so we can actually see everything. If you want to copy what I have here, you can just kind of see what I have, and I can just very slowly here scroll past it, and you can pause the video. But this is something that we did create in the past couple of episodes. So what I'll do is I'll copy everything except for the beginning PHP tags, since we don't need that because I did open and close PHP tags inside the top of my search.php file here. So I'm going to paste everything inside at the top of the site here. And inside of this PHP code, we now just need to make the alterations that we need in order to match it up with the form from inside the index page. So if I were to go inside my index page again, you can see that we did have this form that I talked about extensively a minute ago. And we just basically have one field, which is called user search. So I'm going to copy that name, go back inside my search.php, and say I want to grab a user search. And I'm just going to delete the other two post methods. So I'm just going to change the name here as well to user search. So we do actually have a variable that makes sense with the naming. And with this, we can now just go down and change the query, since we need to make sure this is actually a select statement. We have learned how to do that in a previous database episode. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and delete everything. Again, we're just going to make sure we text wrap here so I can select everything. I'm just going to delete the entire query that we have in here. What I'll do is I'll create a select statement. So I'll say select everything. So select all from a comments, which is our comments table inside the database, where a username is equal to a certain value. In this case here, it is going to be our user search. So I'm just going to write a placeholder called user search. And this is basically all we need inside this query here. We're just selecting all the data from inside that row, including, the actual comment the user made, when the comment was made, which user made that particular comment, what user ID do they have. We're just selecting everything from inside that row inside our comments table, just to show exactly what comments table I'm talking about here if I were to go back inside my database. So inside my database here, we do still have the same tables that we did create together some episodes ago. I'm going to go ahead and link those episodes in the description if there's someone following this tutorial here thinking, oh, well, I don't have this. So I'll go ahead and link that in the description so you can actually keep up with what we're doing here. But basically, we just created two tables. We created one called users and one called comments. And inside my comments table, I actually went in and included a couple extra comments, which we did learn how to do. So you can go back again, watch that episode and create some more comments in there. I just basically went in and manually typed those in inside the SQL tab up here. Created a couple of comments for Crossing, a couple for Bess is cool, and Jane Doe, because those are some of the users that I have inside my website. So if we were to go inside my users table, you can see that I have some of these users in here. So I do have quite a few comments now that I can go inside my website and I can actually pull these out depending on the search term that we put inside our query. So going back in, you can see we're selecting everything from comments where a username is equal to what we submitted inside the website. So going down below here, first of all, we need to actually send in the query. So we're doing that with this prepare statement here. Again, it is important to mention here that we are going back to grab our database file, which is inside a includes folder with the connection to our database. Again, this is something we learned in a previous episode, which I'll also link below if you need to have that one. But we do need to go in and actually change the path because, like I said, we're not inside the includes folder anymore. So inside the require above here, where we actually grab this database connection, we do need to go inside the path and say we want to go inside an includes folder and then grab the dbh.inc.php file. Otherwise, it's going to say, oh, we can't find this file because it's not linked correctly, right? So with this done, I'm going to go back down, and the place where we actually bind the data that we submitted from the actual form, we do need to change these as well. Since we don't have 3 pieces of data submitted, we just have 1. And we do also need to change the names of these down here. So I'm going to copy my user search and say that is what I have as a placeholder. And I'm also going to grab the data called user search and put that in as my variable. And then I'm simply going to execute the statement here. And at this point here, things are going to be a little bit different than the previous couple of episodes, where we just simply went in and made changes to the database or submitted data to it. Because when it comes to actually grabbing data, we need to actually grab the data and set it equal to an array inside our code so we can actually do something with this data. So we need to have the data put inside our PHP code, so to speak. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go below my execute, and I'm just going to go and create a variable called results. And I want to say that I'm going to take my statement that we sent in and executed, and I want to point to a method called fetch all. Because in this case, I want to fetch all the results from the database. There is also something just called fetch for just one piece of data. But in this case, we are potentially grabbing many comments from the database. So this is going to be many results in our case. So fetch all is the one that we're going to be using. Parentheses and semicolon. And inside the parentheses, we need to tell it how do we want to fetch this data. Now, we did talk about arrays in the past because we did have an array episode in one of the previous ones. And inside that episode, we talked about indexed arrays, and we also talked about associative arrays. And when it comes to grabbing data from inside a database, it is much easier to handle the data as an associative array, because essentially each array data is going to have a name associated to it. So we can refer to the name in order to get the data. And in this case, when we grab database data, the column names inside the database are going to be the name for each data. So doing this as an associative array is a very easy and fun way for us to grab data from inside a database in order to know exactly what we're referring to. So what I'll do is I'll go inside and say I am using a PDO connection, and I want to fetch this as an associative array. So we're going to say fetch underscore assoc, which is for associative. So doing this here, we can actually go down and actually delete this header statement because we're not trying to get back to an index page or anything here. We're just basically going to say that we don't, we have the data. So now everything is done. We don't need to do anything else here. I do think it's also important to point out here that we do still have this header function down here, since that if the user tries to access this search page without actually having searched, I don't see a reason for them to access this search.php page. So if they were to try and access this file without having actually searched for something, there's really no need for them to be in here. So again, just to summarize, all the data that we just grabbed using the query from the database are now stored inside variable results as an array. And each data can be referred to using a associative name. So in this case, if I want to grab let's go back inside our database here. If I want to grab this particular comment down here from a certain user, let's say I search for crossing, and now I'm grabbing all the comments from crossing. If I want to grab this is a comment on a website, then I just need to refer to comment underscore text, because that is the column name, and this is going to be what is assigned to our associative array as the name for this piece of data. I think I may be confusing you more just by explaining this over and over again. So let's actually just go ahead and do it, because that's a lot easier for you to see. So what I'll do is I'll go down inside my body page and actually do something with this data, because we grabbed the data at the top of our file. So we can just go further down the file and just refer to variable results, because it's available inside this file here because we just created it. So you can just go ahead and go further down the file, go in and say that maybe we want to create an H3 where we can say this is our search results. Go down below here, open up the PHP tags. So we're going to open up, and we're also going to go ahead and close it here. And then we're just simply going to do a simple if statement where we go in and check if we actually have some sort of data pulled down from the database, because in some cases, if I try to write in a username that doesn't exist inside the database, of course, we're not going to have any sort of comment from any sort of users because the user doesn't exist. The same thing goes if a user just didn't make a comment, then they're not going to have any comments. So we do need to have something default to show the user if there's no comments to actually grab from inside the database. The way we can do that is just by creating a simple if statement where I go in and say, if right now we don't have anything inside this array that we just created, so variable results. So if empty, which is a built-in function inside PHP, I can check for if variable results is currently empty. So if there's no data inside this array, then we don't have any sort of data. And if that is the case, then I just simply want to go in and I want to echo out a piece of HTML, which in this case here, I did actually style a little bit inside my style sheet. So I'm just going to go and create a div here. I'm going to open it up. I'm just going to copy this echo 2 more times, and I'm going to go and close the div down here. And then in between here, we're not going to have a div, we're going to have a paragraph, and we're also going to go and close off this paragraph here to make sure that we close it. And in between the paragraph, I'm just going to say there were no results or something. You can come up with any sort of message you want here. There's a little bit of freedom in these tutorials. So you can just sort of say whatever you think makes sense in this case here. So there were no results. So if we don't have any sort of results from our database query, then we just echo this out. If not, and we did actually get a result, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, go down below, write a else statement. Then I'm going to actually echo out the user, or at least all the comments from the user inside this page here. Now, the way that is going to work is currently we don't know if we have one comment from this user or if we have many comments from the user. We do have an array here, but we don't know how many results there might be inside this array. Either way, we do need to make sure that all the comments that we grabbed inside our associative array do get looped out inside the page, because we need to loop out the result, so to speak. I can actually do something just to show exactly what is going on here, so you have a small idea about what is going on. If I were to do a var underscore dump and actually go in and refer to my variable results, Before we do that though, there's one more thing we need to do inside our little PHP code at the top here, because I actually forgot about that. This die method here, we do want to delete, otherwise we are basically terminating our entire script and stopping everything from running, even if we do grab something from inside the database. So do make sure you don't have that die method up there, otherwise it's not going to work for you. So we're going to go back down, and then we're just going to make sure we save everything. And going inside our website, I can now go in and actually search for a user. So let's go and search for cousin or whatever you might have inside your database there. If I were to do that, you can see, oh, okay, so we get a search result because we didn't get our small message that we just created. We did actually get a var dump here. And basically you go in and see that we have a bunch of data. We have a lot of data in here. And this is actually what we call a multi-dimensional array, because we have an array that has a bunch of arrays inside of them. So each row is going to be a separate array inside this array that we just created. You can actually see at the very top up here, it does actually say that currently we have an array that has 3 other arrays inside of them. So that is basically what this says up here, which means that we have 3 different rows of data with comments from this particular user. Again, this might confuse you even more than actually help you with anything, but let's go ahead and go back inside our website here. And instead of doing a var dump, let's actually go ahead and run a for each loop. Because what we can do using a for each loop, which I do think we talked about before, is how to loop out an array. So using this, we can actually loop out all the multi-dimensional arrays inside this for each loop from inside variable results. So what I can do is I can go in and say, okay, so we do have variable results here. So that is the array that I want to grab. And I want to have a placeholder that I can refer to inside this loop here. So we're going to say as variable row. So I'm going to grab my variable row and just copy it, go inside the loop, and then I'm going to say for each loop, when we loop out one row of data from inside this array with all our data inside of it, I want to make sure to echo out a variable row, and then I'm going to refer to a associative name. So in this case, I'm going to say I want to grab, and we can actually go back inside our database here. I want to grab the username and also the comment text and the created at. So I can actually go back inside my code and say I want to grab the username. Then I'm going to copy this down to the next line and say I want to grab the comment underscore text. And then I want to copy it down and say I also want to grab the created underscore at. And at this point here, we can actually go ahead and test this out inside the browser, but we do have 2 other things that we need to do before we can actually do so. The first thing is we need to make sure it actually looks pretty. So we need to style it in some sort of way. The second thing we need to do is to make sure we don't have any cross-site scripting going on, because 2 episodes ago when we talked about inserting data from your website into the database, we talked about the fact that you have to sanitize the data when you actually output data inside the browser to make sure there's no cross-site scripting happening. So we do need to make sure that since we're outputting data right now, we're actually echoing it out inside the browser, that we go in here and actually run a HTML special character function to make sure that we don't have any sort of cross-site scripting happening. So if a user were to output some sort of JavaScript inside our database, and now we're echoing it out inside our code here, we could actually have a potential issue here where we actually allow the user to output JavaScript inside our website, which is not a good thing. So we need to make sure we use this HTML special characters whenever you want to output data from a database inside a website, or just any point when you want to have any sort of user data spit out inside your website. So making sure to wrap everything in HTML special characters is very important, or any of the other filter underscore input methods or something like that that we have inside PHP in order to properly sanitize data. Now in this case, we're just outputting string, so HTML special characters is the proper one to use here. So at this point here, I would like to actually test this out inside the browser, even though it doesn't look that pretty yet when we actually output it. So if I were to go inside my browser and type in a username that we don't have inside the database, because I want to test out the error message, then you can see we get there were no results, which is good because that is what we're supposed to have. But if I were to type in a user that I know we have inside the database, for example, cousin, and actually run a search, then you can see we get his all the comments that he made inside the database. So you can see we get 1 comment up here, Then we get a second comment over here. Then we have the third comment over here. But as you can see, we have 3 different comments from this particular user here. So we do have his comments showing inside the website. They're just not styled yet. So that's the next step we have to do. So going back inside the code, I will continue styling things here. So I do need to make sure, because I did actually do that inside my notes here, that I wrap everything inside a section tag, because my notes say I did that and I did style it, depending on this. So I have to do it. Otherwise my styling is not going to work. So I'm just going to make sure I paste this in. And then I'm going to go inside my for each loop down here. And I'm going to echo out a div because I want to wrap this inside a div just like we did up here. I'm also going to close the div right after. And then I want to wrap my data inside an h4 and 2 paragraph tags. So we actually have something, styled when it comes to the text as well. So I'm going to say I want to echo, and I want to echo out a h4. And I'm also going to go ahead and concatenate here to make sure we concatenate everything. Then I want to go after and say I want to close off my h4. So I'm going to close off the h4 here. I'm just going to scroll to the side here so you can see everything. And then I'm going to copy paste and do a paragraph for the other 2 down here. So I'm just going to change this to a paragraph, and the same thing when it comes to closing off at the end here, but changing it to a paragraph, of course, like so. And I just want to point out here that there is another way to do this when it comes to HTML inside PHP, which is not to have it echoed out inside a string, but actually close off the PHP tags up here, for example. And then you open it up down here if you want to do that. And then you can actually just write HTML in between here and then echo out the data in between the HTML by opening and closing the PHP tags. So that is another way to do so. But in this case, since we don't have that much HTML going on, I think it's just easier to echo it out. So doing this here and going back inside the website just to test how everything looks like, I'm going to go back here, refresh. And again, if I were to search for someone that does not exist inside the database, for example, this random person here, then you can see that we have there were no results and it's been styled because I wrapped everything appropriately. And if we were to go back and search for cousin, now you can see that we get 3 different search results. And because I styled it and made sure that everything was below each other and wrapped it inside a div container to have a white background color, everything now looks a lot cleaner. And we can also go back and search for another user. So if I were to search for Basse is cool, which is another user that I have inside my database, then you can see we get his comments inside his comments table. And just like that, you created a very basic search system using PHP. So that is something you could actually use inside a website if you wanted to. So learning how to do this is a very good and important step to learning how to output things using PHP when it comes to data. In the next episode, we're going to talk about something called a session, because a session is a way for us to store data inside our inside our session, inside our browser, so we can actually store data from page to page without having to send it using a post or a get method. So using sessions is something we use constantly when it comes to PHP in order for the website to remember things as you're using the web page. So this is something that is very cool to learn about. So we're going to talk about that in the next episode. But for now, this is how you select data and output it. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.